Two more teams have kicked off their offseason in the NFL, and we now know the final two teams that will match up and face off against each other in Super Bowl 56. And we're also going to kick off our search for potential replacements should Tom Brady decide to call it a career and ride off into the sunset right now on the Locked On Bucs podcast.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bucs Nation? Welcome to today's episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast. Thank you for making the Locked On Bucs podcast your first listen or your first view every single day. I'm your host for today's episode, David Harrison. Going solo, my co-host, James Yarko, off for this episode. You find him, however, on Twitter at JYarko_Bucs. Find me at DHarrison82. Find the show at Locked On Bucs and find everything we're writing about your Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the NFL draft coming up over at BucsNation.com. On Twitter at Bucs_Nation. This is the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available on all platforms. And NFC AFC Championship weekend in the books, and we now know the Cincinnati Bengals and the Los Angeles Rams will face off in Super Bowl 56, coming from SoFi Stadium in a copycat league, the ultimate copycat league. The Los Angeles Rams deciding to try and copy what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did just last season, playing a Super Bowl in their home stadium. Just the second time it's ever happened in NFL history, because the first team to do it did it last year. That was your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, led by quarterback Tom Brady. We're going to get a little bit more into him in here in just a minute, but we're going to start off first with the AFC. There was the first game played on Sunday, and it was the first upset. I mean, the only upset of the weekend, but the first real surprise of the weekend. Joe Burrow leading his team in just his second year as an NFL quarterback, really his first full year because he got injured last season against the Washington football team, leading the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl. And perhaps even more impressive, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I know there were some people on Twitter who were also impressed. Evan McPherson, rookie kicker for the Cincinnati Bengals, one of 8 players featured on the graphic that the Cincinnati Bengals sent out celebrating their AFC championship. So I don't know what's more impressive, the Bengals making it to the Super Bowl just 2 years after selecting Joe Burrow as the number 1 overall pick, or the fact that a rookie kicker made it onto the graphic as one of the key 8 players to help spark the Cincinnati Bengals run. But that's what he has done. He's what he's deserved. And speaking of players deserving things, look, Joe Burrow, 23 for 38, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception against the Kansas City Chiefs. Not necessarily, a world-beating performance necessarily, but he didn't have to. On the other side of things, Patrick Mahomes, a lot of people a little surprised by some of the struggles that Patrick Mahomes went through. 26 for 39, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Of course, the end of the first half is something that people are going to be talking about for a very long time. I saw a lot of Buccaneers fans, saw some Buccaneers media sources and outlets and new media outlets talking about how the Buccaneers broke the Kansas City Chiefs. And listen, I've said it on this show. I've said it on my other show, the Locked On Washington Football Team podcast, that I feel bad to a certain extent rooting against Kansas City Chiefs because the reason I root against them wasn't their own creation. So if you go back to the Super Bowl that the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs in last year, what was everybody talking about? They're talking about Patrick Mahomes being the next GOAT. I mean, you have the Madden teaser video, the GOAT with the baby GOAT, and Patrick Mahomes is supposed to be the baby GOAT. And you have people talking about the Kansas City Chiefs being the next great dynasty in the NFL, to follow the Patriots' footsteps, to replace them as Tom Brady rides off into the sunset. It was supposed to be Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what the NFL was pushing. That's the narrative that was out there. Look, the Kansas City Chiefs, 4 straight AFC championship games and all that stuff. It's very impressive. But they go to the Super Bowl. They defeat the San Francisco 49ers. The very next season, they go to the Super Bowl. They lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then this next season, they go to the AFC championship game, lose to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Kansas City Chiefs are regressing, not progressing. And some of that has to do with people getting more and more used to and familiar with what Patrick Mahomes is doing. Some of the things he does, they're just not as amazing as they once were because now people have seen it. They've kind of gotten used to it and they know how to counteract it. You look at Sam Hubbard for the Cincinnati Bengals in some very crucial moments, especially there in the waning moments of regulation before they went to overtime. And he's responding in ways that defenses didn't used to. When Patrick Mahomes used to scramble a lot, they would kind of stay back and say, no, don't go after him too much because you can give him a big lane that he can run through. And on occasion, that still kind of happens, from time to time. But Sam Hubbard comes in, he closes, he doesn't over pursue, he stays smart and intelligent in his angles, and his pursuit of Patrick Mahomes leads to a very big play and keeps the Kansas City Chiefs from winning the game. Patrick Mahomes eventually throws another interception there in overtime. The Cincinnati Bengals turn that into an Evan McPherson field goal right off out of Kansas City with the AFC Championship trophy in their check-in luggage. And they will now face the Los Angeles Rams, who, as many predicted, defeated the San Francisco 49ers. But the San Francisco 49ers had really had the number of Matt Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams, really Coach McVay and the Los Angeles Rams coming into this game. But Jimmy Garoppolo, when James and I made our picks last week, I mentioned that I thought the 49ers had a really good chance of winning. I know the history in that matchup, but just Jimmy G kind of worries me in this thing. And that was really who it was going to hinge on. Whether or not the 49ers won this game was going to depend on what Jimmy Garoppolo could do to not prevent or to keep himself from preventing his team to advancing the Super Bowl. Finishes the game 16 for 30, 232 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a crucial interception, obviously, that sealed the game, the win for the Los Angeles Rams there. Matt Stafford going to his first Super Bowl ever, 31 of 45 for 337 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. So we now know the Detroit Lions, the Los Angeles Rams, Matt Stafford and the Rams will host, right, because it's at SoFi Stadium, the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow getting his first trip to the Super Bowl as well. And yes, the diamonds in the pennant were real. And yes, the macros in the Built Bar are also real, guys. Built Bars are protein bars that taste like candy bars. If you watched our Tom Brady non-retirement recap bonanza that James and I put up on Saturday night, early Sunday morning, depending on your time zone, and you heard me talk about my drive to Mobile. If you look around me, I am in Mobile, Alabama. This is my Airbnb. No, it is not haunted, I don't think, but it kind of looks haunted a little bit. The joys of recording on the road. On the road today, or on Sunday when I arrived in Mobile, Alabama, just like Saturday on my way to Chattanooga, Tennessee, I enjoyed a Built Bar or two on my way to help keep me energized, help keep me fueled, and they do. They taste better than a candy bar in a lot of circumstances, and even better compared to other protein bars, not waxy, not chalky, and they don't taste like they're full of chemicals. Built Bars are tasty. They're covered in 100% chocolate, and most of them pack just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, but they're bringing you a full 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar that's going to pack you full of 240 calories with 30 grams of sugar and dozens of net carbs. Built Bars are the better choice. Get rid of your candy stash, replace it with a Built Bar stash. I've got one in the fridge myself that I brought with me here to Mobile. If you're not a huge fan of working out, but you still want to get healthier, replace candy and pies and cakes and all that stuff with Built Bars. It'll help you reach your goals. And they've got so many delicious flavors with new ones dropping all the time at Built.com. So head to the website when you place your next order. Use a promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off of that order. Again, promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thanks again for making the Locked On Bucs podcast your first listen or your first view every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm David Harrison, your host for this solo episode. James Yarko, my co-host, off for today's show. Find him on Twitter at JYarko_Bucs. Find the show at Locked On Bucs. Find me at DHarrison82 and find everything we're writing about your Buccaneers at BucsNation.com. I told you guys yesterday or on Saturday on our emergency episode with Tom Brady's retirement news and unretirement news and everything that we were going to be starting a position preview series. We're basically going to look at every position on the team or position group at a minimum and start looking at some of the players that are still on the roster. We'll start moving towards, maybe we get rid of some guys. Maybe we recommend you don't re-sign some guys, whatever it is. And then we start looking at potential replacements. So we're going to start off with the quarterback position. For one, it's the most important position on any football team in the National Football League. And for two, with all the recent news and leaks and developments and non-developments and retractions and everything else surrounding Tom Brady, we figured it's a good time to go ahead and jump into this conversation. And I'm going to start it today with some internal guys, but I also want to address Jimmy Garoppolo. So during the course of the game, and I kind of egged some of this on Twitter a little bit as well, mentioning that Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy that a lot of people assume the 49ers are going to want to move during the offseason. Eric Crocker, one of the hosts of the Locked On 49ers podcast, he's here in Mobile with me, former NFL defensive back. He himself sent out a tweet following the end of the NFC Championship game that Jimmy Garoppolo has taken his last snap as a member of the San Francisco 49ers. So if Tom Brady retires and Jimmy Garoppolo becomes available via trade, he is one of those potential guys that could replace Tom Brady. James is going to go over some other potential replacements and some of the bigger name replacements, and maybe even some draft guys that you might want to look at, just overturn every single stone in this conversation. So obviously, if you have your thoughts, share them with us and we'll get as many of them on the air as we possibly can. But starting with Jimmy G, I talked to Eric following the game, try to get an assessment from somebody who covers the San Francisco 49ers. Again, he's a former NFL defensive back, so he's got the he's got the knowledge, he's got the experience of being in that situation. And what gives me confidence in my own analysis of Jimmy G is basically what Eric said, which kind of falls in line with who I kind of thought Jimmy G was in the first place. A solid quarterback, which again, solid equals average in the National Football League. I think Eric said, and I'm paraphrasing here, I think 17 to 22 was about the range that he would rank Jimmy G. He's very much a quarterback who kind of needs to have the environment staged for him to be successful in. If it's a situation where Jimmy G has to kind of create the success himself in an uncomfortable environment, that's where you kind of see things break down. And when you go back to that final interception, the game-ending interception against the Los Angeles Rams, that's what you see. You see a situation where Jimmy G needs to come through for his team, make some key plays, make some clutch plays. The pocket collapses, the pass rush gets home, and off script, Jimmy Garoppolo just isn't as equipped as you want in a lot of quarterbacks to be able to make the play that you need to make for your team, to make the smart play to keep them alive in the game. And that is obviously going to be a problem. Now, there's a history there of Jimmy G replacing or being the understudy for Tom Brady, so this wouldn't necessarily be new territory in that aspect. But I think when you look at what Bruce Arians does with his offense, how do you expect this offense to be run? It relies way too much on the quarterback making smart decisions, timely throws, smart throws. And the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan in turn, and again, talking to Eric, have basically constructed an offense around Jimmy Garoppolo that allows him to essentially be kind of a point guard, distribute the ball, give the ball to Deebo Samuel, let him run 40 yards on a screenplay, get the ball downfield to Brandon Ayuk, let him go up and make the play. With the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, a lot of times the ball needs to be delivered where the play is happening versus delivering the ball and then letting the play happen, other than, short passes to guys like Leonard Fournette or a screen to Chris Godwin here and there. So to me personally, I don't feel like Jimmy Garoppolo brings all of the necessary equipment mentally and fundamentally to lead Bruce Arians' attack. Now, if Bruce were to adjust the offense and all the coaching staff were to adjust the offense based off of Jimmy Garoppolo's limitations, and you basically want to ride the defense the way the San Francisco 49ers do, then I think potentially you can make that happen. But again, a quarterback that not many Bucs fans want, and I imagine as you're listening to me talk about him, you don't want him as well. I think the majority of Bucs fans do not want to see Jimmy Garoppolo step on the field as a starting quarterback for the Buccaneers. But if Tom Brady rides off into the sunset, they have two options currently on the roster from the 2021 season that could potentially be replacement candidates. And the first one we're going to talk about is Blaine Gabbert. You go back to Bruce Arians' comments when he's asked about the potential of Tom Brady retiring. He said he was very comfortable with the options that he had at quarterback. Now, the last time Blaine Gabbert played significant amount of snaps, and I'm not talking about the 3 attempts he had in week 5 against Miami and all that stuff. You have to go, honestly, guys, you have to go back to 2018 with the Tennessee Titans for the last time that Blaine Gabbert had over 100 pass attempts. And honestly, 100 pass attempts in a single season isn't all that much, but he really hasn't had a whole lot of passing attempts since his 2011 rookie year with the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he threw for 413 attempts, completed 210 of them for 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. For his career, Blaine Gabbert is a 56% completion rate guy, 9,000 career yards, 50 career touchdowns, 47 career interceptions. So a very, very tight touchdown to interception ratio. And I think when you look at Blaine Gabbert, you're kind of relying on intelligence through experience of being on teams, watching successful quarterbacks, obviously learning behind Tom Brady, being in Arizona for a year with Bruce Arians and the staff and everything. And again, it's kind of a Jimmy G type of situation, right? You're looking at Blaine Gabbert as not a guy who's going to go out there and make the play as the quarterback that's going to win you the game. You just need him to not be the guy to lose you the game and facilitate getting the ball to your playmakers so they can go win you the game. Rely on your defense to keep the opposing score low enough so that what you produce on the offensive side of things can be enough to go ahead and get you the victories. Is that a Super Bowl recipe? If you ask me on the surface, no, it's absolutely not. And that's obviously not what anybody wants to hear, what Bucs fans want to hear, but I think it's important to look at the on roster, the internal options to potentially replace Tom Brady and Blaine Gabbert being the veteran. I think even if you move forward with, say, Kyle Trask as your quarterback of your future, I think in the beginning, when you enter training camp and all that stuff, you're probably looking at Blaine Gabbert as taking the majority of reps with the starters, with the ones, and then you're going to move Kyle Trask in a little bit slowly, a little bit smoother. And we're going to talk about him a little bit more here in segment 3 as we get into that part of this quarterback assessment. And we're going to do so thanks to our friends over at the GetUpside app, an incredible app that everyone who buys gas needs to know about. The GetUpside app, our listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas they purchase every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app at the Apple Store or Google Play. Use a promo code touchdown and you will get 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill up cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Upside. Again, just download the app for free. Use a promo code touchdown and you'll get up to 25 cents per gallon back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making hundreds of dollars a year using GetUpside, and there's no catch. The cash gets added right back to your account, and you can then cash that out into your bank account, into PayPal, or you can get an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Again, just download the free GetUpside app, use the promo code touchdown, and you'll get that 25 cents per gallon or more back on your first tank. That's promo code touchdown on the free GetUpside app. One more segment here on the Locked On Bucs podcast. David Harrison going solo on this episode. Find me on Twitter at dharrison82. My co-host James Yarko is not here, but he can be found on Twitter at jyarko_Bucs. The show is at Locked On Bucs. We are talking about potential replacements for quarterback Tom Brady should he actually retire, which again, going back to our emergency podcast episode that dropped on Saturday. If you haven't seen that, please go back and check that out. I told everybody, I basically think this is something that's going to happen. Tom is going to retire. The Buccaneers are going to have to find a new quarterback. We're going to springboard that into our position by position look at the current state of the roster and potential holes to fill or potential holes that need to be opened. And we're starting with the quarterback position because, again, most important position on the team. Tom Brady news is all over the place, whether or not he's going to stay, all of that stuff. So it's something that we need to talk about. And first, we're going to look internally. So if Tom Brady leaves, obviously the Buccaneers have to have a new quarterback. Starting internally, looking at Blaine Gabbert and what he potentially brings to the field. Again, a veteran with a lot of experience in the league, a lot of mental reps, a lot of practice reps, not a whole lot of physical reps. Touchdown interception ratio, not the greatest in the world, but he brings that veteran presence and hopefully as a game manager can do enough to help the Buccaneers get some wins if they rely on him. However, there's a younger, potentially sexier, selection or choice for the Buccaneers waiting in the wind or in the wing, and that is 2020 second-round draft pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Kyle Trask, quarterback out of Florida. He's got no NFL stats. So going back to Florida, his 3 years playing there for the Florida Gators, played 3 games in his sophomore season, 12 in his junior, and 12 in his senior seasons. In total, 67.9% completion rate, so almost 68%, a little over 7,000 yards, and 69 touchdowns to 15 interceptions, which is a much better interception or touchdown interception ratio than Blaine Gabbert had. The problem is Kyle Trask, his ratio was in college, and Blaine Gabbert's is in the NFL. You look at Kyle Trask's scouting report from NFL.com, 6'5", 236-pound quarterback, was basically viewed as a second-round projection by Lance Zierlein of NFL.com. Talked about his prototypical size, talked about how he made substantial progress, throughout his career and throughout his time at Florida. Started as a backup, was able to climb up the ranks a little bit, prove himself to his coach, to his team, and do all those things. But he has some weaknesses. I'm going to read those from, again, Lance Zierlein, his NFL.com scouting report on Kyle Trask. It talks about how his pocket setup is slow. It's a little bit labored. And again, you go back to the Los Angeles Rams and that defeat of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the division round. That is going to be a problem. If you have a long buildup into getting into your throws and getting into your pass sets, that is going to be a problem in the NFL. Footwork gets sloppy, and trust me, from my time covering the Washington football team, if you have a quarterback with bad footwork, all those things can come back to bite you in the end. It throws off your throws and makes some of them go higher, some of them go lower, off trajectory, whatever it is. Misses blitz recognition, the mental processing of a quarterback, the intelligence of a quarterback, incredibly important in the National Football League. So obviously all of those things, and there's more that Lance lists, but those are kind of the main ones that I want to talk about because you talk about from the brain down through the body into the feet, into the legs, where the quarterback typically draws power from. If you have problems at all parts of those mechanisms, it's really a concerning thing. Now, the question is, how much did Kyle Trask improve during his rookie season, call it a redshirt year, whatever you want to say, under Tom Brady or behind Tom Brady, under the tutelage of Buccaneers, coaches, Blaine Gabbert, obviously they're helping him as well. Those are things that honestly we just don't know. So that's going to make the evaluation of should you go with Kyle Trask or should he get a chance to play a little bit difficult. But he is an option out there. I think that me personally, when you look at what Bruce Arians is trying to do, again, you go back to reloading, not rebuilding, starting even, he's not a rookie anymore, but you start Kyle Trask in his second year on your team. I think you're in more of a rebuild mode. I think Kyle Trask being selected last year, and I know a lot of you guys out there had some concerns or some issues with Kyle being drafted in the first place. Didn't really feel like he helped the team win today. More so of a future move. And I agree with you. I think that's more so of a future move away for Jason Light. And, the coaches have to kind of get a head start on maybe seeking out starters that they're going to need for the future versus drafting, say, a defensive back or a wide receiver or something like that in the second round last year that could have potentially helped them overcome some of the problems they dealt with. But again, hindsight is 2020. Foresight, oftentimes is obviously not going to be as sharp. So what's done is done. We have Kyle Trask. You have the scouting report on him. Some sloppy footwork, some sloppy mechanics, a little bit less in the mental processing portion of the game from a quarterback. And again, all those things are concerning. They're kind of that's why everybody was concerned when he was drafted in the first place. And I think if the Buccaneers were to move forward with Kyle Trask as their option, I think you still need to bring in a veteran. That's where the Blaine Gabbert comes in, or maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo, or some of these other options that James is going to talk about. And then, of course, you have some other sexier options where Kyle Trask is still part of the potential future plans, not part of the 2022 plans, because the quarterback you bring in is your 2022 plan. James is going to get deeper into some of those options starting on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Bucs podcast. I am here in Mobile, Alabama at the 2022 Reese's Senior Bowl. There's some other great guys here with me, and Locked On NFL Draft host Ryan Tracy and Eric Crocker are going to be here as well. I'm going to do the best I can to sit down with them on a nearly daily basis as we go through these practices with some of these draft prospects and get their thoughts, share my own thoughts as well as to what these guys are doing out here, the good work they're putting in. In the meantime, all of you out there, I want to thank you again for making us your first listen or your first view every single day. The Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So please come back tomorrow, check out James, and check out everything that we have dropping here at the Locked On Bucs podcast. If you have a question or a take that you want to send in, shoot them to lockedonbucspodcast@gmail.com or call them in to 813-444-5841. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Bets podcast, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling, free and available on all platforms, just like the Locked On Bucs podcast. It's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you again for joining me. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, wash your hands, fire the cannons, and thank you for joining me right here at Locked On Bucs.